Well, if you wish to relish mutton keema without a goat having to give up a pound of flesh, there is an alternative, plant-based meat. It's as nutritious as meat, tastes like meat, feels like meat, but is not meat. A whole host of startups are turning meat eating into a more palatable experience. Besides being cruelty-free, it's also eco-friendly, as animal agriculture is a leading driver of ecosystem loss and environmental degradation worldwide. As veganism gains in popularity, with celebrities including superstar athletes like Serena Williams and Virat Kohli advocating the benefits of a vegan diet, the trend is catching on. In the US, plant-based meat company Beyond Meat went public in 2019. The maker of meatless burgers Impossible Foods is planning to follow shortly, is what we're given to understand. Not only consumers, investors are also turning conscious as countries target net zero emissions and food security. Last year, a record $3 billion was pumped into the alternative protein sector. That's more than what the sector raised in a single year ever before. Investments in smart protein startups in the Asia-Pacific region have gone up by 6 times, showing that the epicenter of this innovation is starting to shift to Asia. That's according to a Good Food Institute report. But surely the demands of a hungry Indian are not easily met. So how are India's smart protein startups innovating and helping consumers turn vegan, or at least look at other alternatives without asking for a sacrifice of the meat-eating experience? We find out on today's episode of Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shireen Bhan. Joining me today is Abhishek Sinha, the co-founder and CEO of GoodDot. Also with us, Abhay Rangan, the founder of Good Milk, and Varun Deshpande, the managing director at Good Food Institute India. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on Young Turks. Abhishek, my first question to you. And, I was looking at your history. You first toyed with the idea of smart proteins in 2003, but formally you started to put this idea together in 2013. So in many ways, you were ahead of the curve, at least here in India. What made you think that this could be a viable business idea?
So Shireen, thanks for the opportunity. So basically, the thing was distilled by the parents, do something larger than yourself. So that was a primary drive. So I was a meat eater, ex-meat eater, but I was also an animal lover. In my final year of engineering, I came across a study sponsored by the Dutch government on tissue culture-based meat. So that told me that here is an idea. There are millions and millions of consumers, potential consumers like me. If given a choice, the right taste and the right price, they would prefer to have a non-violent meat on their plate. So this is what really fascinated me, and it was in 2013 when I finally formed a team and we worked together on this project, which has gone to the current situation right now. So we are quite happy how we have progressed since then.
Well, I'll talk to you about the changes that you've seen in the market since the time that you went commercial. But let me get Abhay into the conversation, because Abhay, you started fairly early in your career as well. You were all of 19 when you decided to give this a go. What has the experience been so far of putting Good Milk together?
Thanks for having me on here, Shireen. I think the experience has been very encouraging. I think we came in at the right time. The intent was, for us at least, never to start a business. It was just to create a way to scale up our own impact and efforts to do more altruism in this space. The customer response, the response from the investor community, and really talking to various people in all facets of life, be it in corporates, be it as individuals, or be it in the public sector. It's been very encouraging to see so many people understand what this is all about. And people are looking at it from the lens of wanting to do something bigger, wanting to be a part of something more meaningful, rather than just looking at, say, individual choices that may prioritize taste or sensory pleasure for 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, yes, a lot of people like yourself have decided to take the entrepreneurial route because you believe in the cause. But Varun, let me ask you this. While Abhishek and Abhay have decided to take their businesses forward, what's shaping or driving the market today, specifically here in India? Of course, people are a lot more conscious or a lot more aware, but it eventually boils down to choices. It boils down to the product as well. I mean, we've had experiences with soya going back decades, and it didn't feel like the real thing. So what's shaping the smart protein landscape in India today?
Thanks, Shireen. So this is a great question. And of course, we work across business, science, and policy to establish this sector. So we're seeing kind of the whole board here. You're exactly right. These products are going far beyond the previous generation of soy nuggets or mock meats that have existed for decades or even generations, right? What we need to do here is enable a switch that feels like a simple switch, not a sacrifice. So for every type of consumer, whether it's meat eaters, curious vegetarians, just people who are generally flexitarian, who are trying to reduce their consumption of meat, eggs, and dairy, and they're doing it for public health, for planetary health, for personal health. We need to enable that choice. And the great thing is, Shireen, consumers are telling us if we build it, they will come. So the entire cohort of dozens of entrepreneurs like the wonderful on the show with us today here are doing exactly that. They're really bringing products to market that are next generation and which enable that tastes the same or better and eventually costs the same or less theory. That's kind of what we're trying to create here.
Well, you make a very valid point there that, I don't think that we would have seen the market take off in the manner in which it has if it wasn't a viable switch that the consumer had to make as opposed to a sacrifice. And that's the point that I want to take forward with Abhishek. Abhishek, take me through how much of your bandwidth, time, resources are really going into the R&D aspect of the business. Because as Varun was pointing out, the consumer wants to feel good at the same time and care about the environment and so on and so forth. But, they also want to enjoy the sensory experience. And who are you targeting at this point in time? I mean, are you targeting the flexitarian? Are you targeting the vegetarian? How is the market being segmented?
So Shireen, that's a very important fundamental question. So our approach as the major players in the space is we are targeting the meat eaters and the flexitarians, because there are people, if given as Varun mentioned, given the right taste and the right price, they are willing to give it a shot. So that is where we are coming from. So the market is responding fantastically. R&D is extremely critical. You will find that there are, global majors like Unilever, Nestle's, Tyson Foods, all of them are entering into the space. But there are no plug-and-play format in plant-based meat because it is very R&D intensive. Every company comes up with different product. So the winner will be the company which brings the product which tastes like meat and is at a discount to meat. So I think that is where the R&D, our efforts are ongoing. We have worked very hard towards developing our product lines, and the R&D is continuous. So that is one of our significant cost centers for us.
Yes, I would imagine that is going to be a significant cost. But Abhishek, I want to understand from you, you're up against the big boys. You talked about Unilever, Nestle, and so on and so forth. In that context, then, look at the size and strength of their balance sheet versus a startup like yours. How do you compete?
Passion, just passion. We are out there. We don't take no for an answer. We breathe in, this movement of, saving billions of animals. Those lives are counting on us, and we are not taking no for an answer. Neither from the big boys, neither from the consumers. We are going to create a product which meets the expectation of an average consumer. And as they say, we'll give them an offer they cannot refuse. So that is what we are working towards. Yeah.
Okay, make an offer that they cannot refuse. So, Abhay, let me understand from you how you're going about building your supply chain. I mean, you're offering a full stack of products across milk, curd, cheese, paneer, and so on and so forth. So, how are you going about building the supply chain?
Thanks, Shireen. So we're looking at what experiences people have with dairy. We're trying to recreate those same experiences, right? Taste and texture, for example, and maybe price point are one aspect of it. But it's really also packaging. It's really how it's delivered. And it's really recreating that dairy experience to your customer, be it getting milk early in the morning, right to your doorstep. That is what consumers are used to. They're used to having their morning chai. And plant-based milk would not be doing justice to its overall vision if it did not accomplish all these things. So people may be consuming dairy products by habit, or for convenience or tradition or taste. And we're looking to address all of this rather holistically, and then get to a point where people feel like there is no friction at all in switching over from dairy to plant-based dairy.
Mm-hmm. And is it getting easier, Abhay, for you to actually be able to push the story, to take this story to the market? Because if I take a look at your numbers, of course, it's a small base, but you have seen a 5x jump over last year. So is it getting easier now? Is there a mindset shift? Is there a larger consciousness in the consumer about making the switch?
Absolutely. I think there are several macro trends sort of feeding this drive. One of which is more consciousness around what goes into our body, and a lot of consumers are aware about making decisions now based on the choices available. There's also the internet, which has opened up a lot of information and free access to numbers that would not be available otherwise. And consumers are now more aware, they're more internet savvy, they're more data driven in their purchases. And we think it's more of a natural step for them to understand that eating consciously is sort of the next level of their consumer evolution. Absolutely. I think what has also transpired last year, which was the pandemic, has ever more than ever shown the importance of plant-based in our lifestyles, how we can consume quality nutrition safely. And most pandemics are from zoonotic sources. And I think that conversation that happened really drove more of a spotlight on plant-based meats and dairy. And I think this is one of the larger trends that has helped people understand and get more aware.
Well, the pandemic has opened up opportunities for a bunch of sectors, and it looks like the smart protein sector is one of those spaces. But Varun, I want to come back to you. And a lot of this has possibly been made possible also on account of the fact that these are all direct-to-consumer or largely direct-to-consumer brands that have been given a lease of life on account of the internet. But as you look at the landscape and how it's being reshaped today, what do you see as the big opportunities as well as the big challenges that some of them will have to confront?
Yeah, this is a great question, Shireen. I think when it comes to any category in India that's consumer facing, whether it's plant-based meat, which is a relatively new category, or whether it's shampoos that are being sold by the likes of Unilever, the question I think is, can we transcend that early adopter who is already consuming like their global counterparts in Singapore, New York, London, etc. They're already flexitarian, they want to eat for the planet, etc. Transcending that and going to the true mass market is definitely a non-trivial task, right? And that means embedding into supply chains that already exist. And in fact, that's a huge opportunity in India, right? We have this fantastic agricultural biodiversity that we can leverage here. Crops like pulses, millets, etc. We need to connect backwards into that agri supply. We need to enable huge distribution. This really needs government, industry, startups, everyone to come together and kind of go into mission mode on this. Because as we said earlier, and Abhay and Abhishek have been saying as well, this isn't just about kind of enabling conscious consumption in terms of switching over from animals to vegan foods. It's also a key piece of our climate resilience, story as well moving forward.
Yes, you're right in pointing that out. But, Abhay, as well as Abhishek, I want to understand from you, what are the big challenges that you're seeing today? And Abhishek, let me start by asking you that. Varun alluded to some of them, and also the need to sort of build out this ecosystem much more robustly. But outside of the R&D spend, which of course is your big cost at this point in time, what are the big friction points?
I think, Shireen, it's a awareness, creating awareness for a new category, not just a product or a brand. So I think that's and also changing of habits, right? I think these are critical aspects. Interestingly enough, our experience is unlike the experience of any other players in the space of plant-based meat across the globe. With our distribution partner being RCM, our products are now being sold in brick and mortar formats, around 8,000 stores in Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Jammu Kashmir, Nagaland, Kerala, all across India. So it's not just the metros, which is very intuitive that the flexitarians and the upwardly mobile client from the metros are open to consume plant-based meat, but a villager in Bihar is open to consume meat. We are supplying to them. So that gives us a lot of hope that, India is a dark horse of the plant-based meat space. The need is there, it is latent, but it will manifest. And when it does manifest, it will be a very, very strong market across the globe.
Okay. India is the dark horse and there is latent demand waiting to be exploited. So, Abhay, let me ask you, what are you doing at this point in time to push demand? And more importantly, the viability of the business, because, you may have started out as being an altruistic business, but for many startups who are in this space, eventually you will need to show a return and eventually you will have to return money to investors as well. So how viable is this business?
I think it gets very viable at scale. One must ignore short-term needs for higher margins and and then focus on what is available to us, what opportunities are available to us in the long run. I think what we are doing is we're focusing on keeping our costs low and being available in as many places as possible. You asked what are we doing to generate demand? I think some part of it is also having supply in certain places. Even being available in certain places allows people to demand for a product. For example, a lot of plant-based dairy is inaccessible to cities or towns where there may not be enough of a population that consumes this, so that plant-based dairy brands invest in sort of marketing and making their products accessible. I think there are some things we're working on where we may very well see our distribution being fairly large in these places that may not be Bangalore, Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, Hyderabad, etc. And going beyond that, I think being available is the first step. Regarding unit economics, I think it's really a sense of how big we can get. The dairy and meat industries are so large, and part of the reason they're so affordable and still profitable is that they serve millions and millions of customers every day. I think plant-based dairy will only succeed when it achieves the same price point or even a lower price point, which is possible from a first principles perspective. But second of all, I think it is that scale that will allow plant-based companies to access raw materials at low prices, access commoditized manufacturing and distribution resources around the country, and we can pass those savings on to the customers, but importantly also keep some of those savings as margins.
Yes, and it eventually boils down to scale. So, Varun, let me address that issue with you. To Abhishek's point that India is likely to emerge as the dark horse, and I imagine that is what a lot of investors who are looking at this space are betting on. What are the big insights that you take away from what you've been able to see so far, and more importantly, the kind of milestones that you expect India to be able to achieve given the global experience?
Shireen, we're seeing massive interest in the space, certainly. We're seeing, as I said, dozens of entrepreneurs entering the space. We're also seeing some of the largest food, agri-biotech corporations interested, and that's what's really going to build this value chain from the ground up. But I think we're still at the beginning of what is a decades-long journey, and we absolutely need to take it very seriously, right? We need industry, academia, government to come together. Abhishek and Abhay have already talked about this, but if we think about any of the goals that we as a nation care about, whether it's climate resilience, whether it's preventing future pandemics, whether it's economic growth, all of these things are affected by sunrise industries like smart protein. I would say it's as important as renewable energy in that respect. So we really need a kind of mission for smart protein. We need people to kind of steward the talent pool here. We have fantastic, affordable talent that is world-class. We're actually already seeing a brain drain of talent here, people who are going abroad and founding some of the most important companies in the space. We need to train those people, retain them in India, and support them to start companies like GoodDot and Good Milk and scale those companies, or join GoodDot and Good Milk, right? We need to invest in R&D at huge levels, right? Countries like Singapore, Netherlands, Canada, Israel, they're seeing this as a major part of their growth story over the next decade. And we don't want to be left behind in India. So while Abhishek certainly says that India is a dark horse, there's a work to do in order to get there. Massive infrastructure investments, massive R&D investment, and stewarding the talent pool. And if we can do that, we can build a thriving, affordable, sustainable supply of protein at all levels of the socioeconomic pyramid. And that's really what we want to enable here.
Varun, I just wanted to pick up on the point that you made. And, if you look at what's happening within the Indian space, in the smart protein space, most of these companies are barely a few years old. So it is a very, very nascent business at this point in time. And you said it will take about a decade or so for it to reach some sort of an inflection point. But on the regulatory side, is there a need for more? And what exactly is the situation when we talk about the regulatory framework today?
Yeah, Shireen, it's a great question. I just wanted to actually flag that, look, the global market for this stuff is anywhere from $100 billion to $370 billion within the decade, right? That's from organizations like JP Morgan, Jefferies, UBS, et cetera, et cetera. So the global market is also a major opportunity here. We have the opportunity to compete for these global supply chains. Companies like GoodDot are already doing that and exporting, right? I think from a regulatory readiness standpoint, there are a few things, and it's not just regulatory, it's also policy support. But from a regulatory readiness standpoint, some of these products might be novel foods, or they might have novel ingredients. And so, organizations like FSSAI have been excellent in terms of their dialogue and in terms of working with companies in the space to enable their path to market. But certainly we can get a bit better in terms of turnaround times and things like that. I think moving forward as well, what we're really looking for is the support from policy to really create infrastructure investment and a lot of great priority sector lending, approaches that can help us localize some of the supply chain for this. As I said earlier, build backwards into that agri supply chain, benefit farmers, etc. So it's really a broad swath of, Shireen, that can enable this sunrise sector to grow. And it's not just regulatory, it's also policy in that regard.
Absolutely. But Abhishek, to the point that Varun was making there about the fact that while you are catering to domestic demand and hoping that domestic demand grows, there is a market available outside of India, and you're starting to cater to that. In fact, if I see where you're being sold, Canada, Dubai, South Africa, Mauritius, Nepal, Singapore. So how large are the global aspirations? What are you targeting?
It's quite large, Shireen. Like, we have been validated at quite a few global platforms. For example, there was an event called Parliament of World Religion.
We seem to have lost Abhishek, but till we re-establish connect with him, Abhay, let me ask you that question. Plans to go look outside of India to go global?
Absolutely. I think India is well poised to be the global leader of plant-based manufacturing. A part of the reason is that, the supply chain is so robust here in terms of, like Varun said, in terms of agri-resources. And you see a lot of global plant-based companies sourcing from India, be it novel ingredients like jackfruits or mung beans, etc. There are, like also Varun pointed out, a lot of millets and pulses that haven't yet been explored in various novel applications like plant-based dairy or plant-based meat. And there's tens and thousands of these ingredients available. We think that, given the potential for all this, plus the jugaad that Indian entrepreneurs come with, we can create globally competitive products that are cheaper than animal product counterparts globally. And I think India is very well poised to do that. It already has the manufacturing infra, and there's a lot of regulatory stimulus towards helping companies achieve more exports. And I would be very surprised if India didn't end up being one of the global manufacturing leaders of plant-based.
Well, manufacturer as well as supplier, and that is certainly something that entrepreneurs like you are going to be working on. Abhishek, we've got you back. You were talking about the global plans.
Yeah, so basically, Shireen, I think we are being sold by the master distributor of decacons like Beyond Meat and Oatly in Africa. So they have onboarded us as one of their brands. So that showed a young brand from India can compete with the very best brands across the globe. Our products have a strength of being shelf stable at ambient temperature with a shelf life of 12 months. So that really helps us push the products across the global market at a fraction of a cost than a frozen product. So that really opens up a lot of potential opportunities. And that is why, I feel that in India, companies can really come up with solutions which not just takes care of the Indian market, but also the global market, and where the numbers are phenomenal and it's already matured. So I think both sides, Indian market as well as international markets, are there for the taking for companies who are into this space.
Varun, I'm going to give you the final say. Given the market opportunity and the headroom for growth that you, alluded to in your conversations with investors, investor partners, what kind of capital is likely to come into this sector over the next few years?
Shireen, as you said, we saw about $3.1 billion globally invested in smart protein across all categories last year, right? We think in India, we have major room for growth. We've only just seen the beginning of this. We're seeing funds that are being specially put together for smart protein, specifically in India. We're also seeing major agri and food investors like Omnivore and others who are taking note of the space and saying that they want to invest in the space. So I think starting from a small base, of course, we'll certainly see major growth over the next decade. I wouldn't stop short of saying this can be a multi-billion-dollar market in India. And I should restate that we think from bean to burger or bean to biryani, there's a major opportunity for us to be kind of protein farmers for the rest of the world. This is already emerging as some kind of space race for smart protein globally, right? We're seeing all of these countries, Netherlands, Japan, Canada, Singapore, Israel, etc., making major statements and shows of intent. So we really don't want to miss out. We've seen what India can bring to the table, whether it's investment, entrepreneurship, industry, government. We've seen what we can bring to the table, even in the space race recently. So we don't want to miss out in this space race for smart protein.
Well, the bean to burger story has clearly taken off globally. Let's hope that India can be the leader in the bean to biryani story. Abhishek, Sinha, Abhay Rangan and Varun Deshpande, appreciate you joining us here to give us a primer on where things currently stand as far as the smart protein business in India is concerned, the opportunity, the challenges and the road ahead. Appreciate your time and wish you the very best of luck. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with a lot more.